Tonight, we slip quietly into the world of Warren Buffett, born in Omaha, Nebraska in 1930, when the country was struggling and families counted every penny. His childhood was simple but full of curiosity. He liked numbers and spent hours with baseball statistics and columns of figures in the newspaper. While other children played without thinking of cost, he sold chewing gum and bottles of Coca-Cola door to door. Even then, he sensed that small decisions repeated over time could build something lasting. Money was not about extravagance for him. It represented freedom and independence, the ability to pursue ideas at his own pace. The grocery store owned by his grandfather was one of his favorite places. He would walk its aisles, touching the cans and listening to shoppers talk about prices. The smell of coffee and fresh bread mixed with quiet conversations taught him about human behavior. At home, his father, a stockbroker, spoke about markets at the dinner table. Warren learned early on that there was a difference between saving and spending, between speculation and prudence. By age 6, he decided he would one day be wealthy, though not for the sake of luxury. To him, wealth meant not needing to answer to anyone else. Books became his gateway to understanding how to achieve that independence. In the library, he found 1,000 Ways to Make $1,000, a book that showed how small ventures could grow with patience. He traced the compounding interest tables with his finger, amazed that money could earn more money simply by being left alone. He began to see patterns everywhere, knowledge built upon knowledge, habits stacked upon habits, savings growing quietly in the background. The idea of compounding comforted him during uncertain times and suggested that careful, steady effort could transform modest beginnings into something substantial. By his early teens, he had saved enough to buy a used pinball machine and placed it in a barber shop. When customers enjoyed playing and the machine's coin box filled up, he bought another. Soon, multiple machines in different locations turned quarters into dollars while he attended school. This taught him about reinvestment and scale. Profits could be recycled to produce even more profits. When he sold the small pinball empire to a returning war veteran, he made his first real deal and learned that patience and attention to detail often uncover opportunities others overlook. Each of these experiences reinforced his belief that numbers, when respected, could bring order to chaos and lay the foundation for a life built on steady, thoughtful effort. In the evenings, he would sit on the porch and imagine a future shaped by curiosity and integrity. The world outside was unpredictable, but in his mind, the steady rhythm of compounding and disciplined saving created a sense of calm. Those early thoughts would guide him for decades, and tonight they carry us gently toward rest. As Warren entered his teenage years, his curiosity about money shifted from simple trades to more deliberate investments. At age 11, he bought 3 shares of City Service stock for himself and 3 for his sister, feeling the thrill of ownership when the tiny certificates arrived in the mail. The price dipped soon after, and he worried he had made a mistake, but he held on. When the stock later rose slightly, he sold it, making a modest profit. Later, he learned that if he had held just a little longer, he would have gained far more. This early lesson in patience would echo through his life. He saved much of his paper route earnings and at 14 bought a 40-acre patch of Nebraska farmland with a partner. They hired a tenant farmer to work the land, and the modest rent checks arriving each quarter showed him how assets could produce income without his constant attention. High school found Warren socially shy but intellectually engaged. He was more interested in reading financial reports than attending dances. He kept detailed ledgers of his earnings and savings, tracking pennies with the care other teenagers reserved for sports statistics. In class, he excelled in math and economics, often surprising teachers with the depth of his questions. During summers, he would travel with his father to New York City, where he visited the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. The roar of voices and the clatter of the ticker tape fascinated him. He watched traders signaling orders and imagined a future in which he might participate in those flows of capital. These trips expanded his sense of what was possible beyond Omaha. He also began to experiment with small businesses beyond pinball machines. With a friend, he bought a used hearse, repainted it, and rented it out for events and parties. The idea was playful, and the novelty attracted customers. The venture didn't last long, but it added to his understanding that ideas could come from anywhere. At one point, he considered starting a stamp collecting business, but decided the market was too thin. Each experiment added to his experience and reinforced his comfort with calculated risk. He avoided debt, preferring to start small and grow only when he could fund expansions from profits. This discipline would become a hallmark of his later investments. When graduation approached, his parents hoped he would pursue a conventional career like law or politics. He briefly attended the Wharton School in Pennsylvania, but found the rigid curriculum stifling. After 2 years, he transferred to the University of Nebraska, completing his studies quickly. He was eager to get on with investing, reading every book on finance he could find. He devoured the works of John Burr Williams and Philip Fisher and studied how markets behaved during booms and crashes. He was particularly drawn to the ideas of Benjamin Graham, whose book, The Intelligent Investor, outlined a disciplined approach to finding undervalued stocks. These concepts fit neatly with his own observations about buying what others overlooked. They planted the seed of a more structured methodology that would soon change his life. One evening, after poring over Graham's book, Warren wrote him a letter asking to study under him. He was accepted into Columbia Business School, where Graham taught. The prospect of learning directly from the Dean of Wall Street lit his imagination. As he prepared to leave Omaha, he felt a mix of anticipation and calm. The path he had followed from door-to-door sales to farmland ownership was leading him toward deeper knowledge. He sensed that the techniques he would learn in New York would refine his instincts and allow him to build something far larger than the tiny ventures of his youth. Columbia University in New York offered Warren an intellectual home and a community of students who shared his fascination with numbers. In Benjamin Graham's classroom, he encountered a systematic approach to investing that resonated deeply with him. Graham preached the importance of intrinsic value and a margin of safety, urging students to treat stocks as ownership stakes in real businesses rather than lottery tickets. He taught them to look beyond market noise, to examine balance sheets and cash flows, and to buy when a company's market price fell below a conservative estimate of its worth. The lecture hall was warm, the air thick with chalk dust and hushed murmurs, but Warren's mind buzzed with clarity as he recognized his own childhood instincts in Graham's theories. He felt like a puzzle piece finding its place. Warren devoured the coursework, soaking up concepts about net nets, earnings power, and liquidation values. He spent hours in the university library pulling thick volumes of Moody's manuals off shelves and tracing his finger down columns of numbers. He would jot notes in the margins, highlighting companies trading below the value of their assets. Graham's teachings transformed his view of risk. Instead of fearing volatility, he learned to welcome it, knowing that market fluctuations could create opportunities for disciplined investors. Warren's sense of calm in the face of uncertainty grew stronger. Outside the classroom, he sought out Graham's guidance, and though Graham was reserved, he recognized in the earnest young Nebraskan a kindred spirit. After earning his master's degree, Warren applied to work at Graham Newman, Graham's investment firm. Initially, Graham turned him down, citing a policy against hiring relatives of clients. The rejection stung, but Warren returned to Omaha and continued investing on his own. He took a job teaching at the University of Nebraska and poured his savings into stocks he believed were undervalued. He studied small companies with little analyst coverage, just as he had sifted through discarded racetrack tickets years earlier. Eventually, a position opened at Graham Newman, and Graham invited him to join. Warren moved back to New York with his young family and spent 2 formative years working as an analyst, examining dozens of companies each week and writing concise investment memos. The experience sharpened his ability to separate signal from noise and reinforced his belief in disciplined buying. When Graham retired and closed his firm in 1956, Warren faced a crossroads. He could continue working for someone else or strike out on his own. Encouraged by friends and family who trusted his judgment, he returned to Omaha and formed Buffett Partnership Limited. He raised small sums from a handful of investors, including his aunt and a few close acquaintances. He made a promise to treat their money as carefully as his own and to take a cut only if the partnership performed well. The partnership agreements were simple, written with plain language and fair terms. Warren set strict rules. He would not invest in businesses he did not understand. He would avoid leverage, and he would focus on companies selling for less than they were worth. Those guidelines, shaped by Graham's teaching and his own experience, became the foundation of his practice. In the first years of the partnership, Warren worked from a small office with little more than a desk, a telephone, and stacks of annual reports. He studied each company intensely before committing capital. He searched for what he called cigar butts, unloved businesses that still had a few puffs of value left in them. By buying these companies when they were cheap and selling when the market recognized their value, he produced remarkable returns for his partners. The work was patient and methodical, and it suited his temperament. He found joy not in the outward appearance of success, but in the quiet act of uncovering value where others saw none. Each day he sharpened his ability to see through noise, just as he had learned to see through the chatter of a busy grocery store and a bustling trading floor. The late 1950s and early 1960s were a time of steady progress for Buffett Partnership L'Olade. Warren's reputation grew among a small circle of investors who appreciated his honesty and consistent results. He continued to seek out neglected companies, selling at deep discounts to their net assets. One such investment was Dempster Mill, a manufacturing company in Beatrice, Nebraska, that made windmills and farm equipment. When Warren first invested, the company was struggling. Its inventory sat idle, and management seemed unsure of how to turn things around. Warren accumulated shares quietly, eventually gaining control and installing new leadership. Through patient oversight and the sale of excess assets, he unlocked value that the market had ignored. The experience taught him that active engagement, not just passive ownership, could sometimes increase the worth of an investment. Another partnership investment was Sanborn Map Company, which produced detailed fire insurance maps used by underwriters. By the late 1950s, Sanborn's mapping business had declined as newer technologies emerged. However, the company had accumulated a portfolio of securities that were worth far more than its entire market capitalization. Warren analyzed the books and realized that for every share of stock purchased, investors were essentially buying $1's worth of securities for about 50 cents. He presented his findings to Sanborn's board and negotiated a distribution of the investment portfolio to shareholders. The result was a handsome return for the partnership. These cases exemplified his early cigar butt strategy. Pick up overlooked businesses for a tiny price, enjoy one last puff of value, then move on. As the assets under management grew, Warren wrote thoughtful letters to his partners outlining his philosophy and performance. His writing was plain and often humorous, avoiding jargon. He explained why he bought certain companies, described mistakes honestly, and reminded partners that results should be judged over a multi-year horizon rather than quarter by quarter. His transparency fostered trust and allowed partners to sleep at night knowing that their money was in careful hands. He stressed that he would close the partnership if he could no longer find attractive investments rather than invest for the sake of remaining active. This discipline set him apart in an industry often driven by churn. By 1962, the partnership's success allowed Warren to consider larger opportunities. He had long noticed a struggling textile mill in New England called Berkshire Hathaway. The company's stock price fluctuated around its tangible asset value, and periodic tenders to repurchase shares had created opportunities for profit. Warren began buying shares in the open market, intending to flip them for a small gain when the company offered to repurchase. After a disagreement with management about the price of a tender offer, he decided instead to take control of the business. What began as a short-term trade turned into a pivotal decision. Berkshire's textile operations were declining, but its corporate shell became the vehicle through which Warren would channel future investments. The purchase marked the start of a transformation that would reshape his career. The partnership continued until 1969, when Warren chose to wind it down. He felt that opportunities for value investing at small scale were diminishing and that his responsibilities at Berkshire were growing. He distributed the partnership's assets to his partners, many of whom chose to reinvest in Berkshire shares. Even in closing, he focused on fairness and clarity, ensuring that partners understood what they were receiving. This period left him with both the capital and the confidence to expand his investments beyond small cigar-butt situations. It also marked the beginning of a new chapter in which quality businesses and long-term ownership would become increasingly important. Warren's purchase of Berkshire Hathaway, a failing textile manufacturer, turned out to be both a challenge and an opportunity. The mills were old, their looms clattered loudly, and the business faced stiff competition from cheaper foreign producers. Operating profits were meager, and reinvestment would have required pouring money into an industry that offered little future. Instead of pouring resources into cloth, Warren and his small team focused on redirecting Berkshire's capital into other ventures. He acquired National Indemnity, an insurance company, which provided steady underwriting profits and, more importantly, large amounts of premium float that could be invested until claims came due. This float became a powerful engine, allowing Berkshire to invest with the leverage of borrowed capital at low cost, while always maintaining a margin of safety. Insurance taught him that good businesses are not always glamorous. National Indemnity's offices were modest and its business straightforward. Underwrite policies conservatively, collect more in premiums than you pay out in claims, and invest the float carefully. Warren's disciplined approach to underwriting meant avoiding the temptation to chase market share by underpricing risk. He insisted on prudent reserves and avoided insuring risks he did not understand. The results were predictable profits, which he could then deploy into attractive investments. Over time, Berkshire acquired other insurance businesses, including GEICO, which would become one of its crown jewels. Each acquisition was made with an eye toward long-term value rather than short-term earnings. At the urging of his friend and new partner, Charlie Munger, Warren began to look beyond cigar-butt situations. Charlie argued that buying wonderful businesses at fair prices was better than buying fair businesses at wonderful prices. He pointed to companies like See's Candies, a West Coast confectioner with a loyal customer base and strong brand. Seas produced modest but consistent cash flow far exceeding the capital required to operate. Its strength lay in its intangible assets, its reputation for quality, and its customers' emotional attachment. Berkshire purchased Seas in 1972 for $25 million, a price that included a premium above tangible assets. In the decades that followed, Seas generated hundreds of millions in profits, demonstrating that paying up for quality could be wise. Berkshire also invested in blue chip stamps, a trading stamp business that generated cash despite being in decline. The cash flow from stamps helped fund other acquisitions. Berkshire's structure allowed Warren and Charlie to move capital from declining industries to growing ones without the friction of taxes that would have accompanied a sale. This capital allocation flexibility became a defining feature of Berkshire's approach. In each case, the key was to understand the economics of the business and to avoid overpaying, even for quality. The combination of float from insurance and cash flows from durable businesses created a foundation that could support larger investments. The textile mills in New England eventually closed, their machinery sold, and workers released with respect. Warren wrote honestly about the decision, acknowledging the impact on employees and the community. He did not try to sugarcoat the loss. Instead, he focused on the responsibility to allocate capital where it would do the most good. The closure marked the end of Berkshire's beginnings as a textile company and the birth of Berkshire Hathaway as a diversified conglomerate. Through these years, Warren's partnership with Charlie deepened. Their conversation stretched late into the night, one man's practical Midwestern cadence balancing the other's California wit. Their combined discipline and flexibility would allow Berkshire to navigate decades of change while remaining anchored in timeless principles. The 1970s and 1980s saw Berkshire Hathaway evolve into a collection of high-quality businesses. Guided by the philosophy of buying wonderful companies at fair prices, Warren and Charlie sought out enterprises with durable competitive advantages, businesses with moats that protected them from rivals. One such investment was the Washington Post Company, which they purchased in 1973. The newspaper held a dominant position in the nation's capital and had strong cash flows. However, the stock market had punished it during a bear market. Warren recognized that the Post's brand and management were stronger than the market believed, and he quietly acquired a large stake. In time, the investment paid off handsomely. He later joined the Post's board, forging a lifelong friendship with publisher Katharine Graham and gaining a deeper appreciation for the challenges of media. Another major purchase was the credit card company American Express. In the mid-1960s, American Express had been rocked by a scandal involving phony financial instruments, causing its share price to plummet. Warren assessed the situation and concluded that the scandal did not impair the core business. He invested heavily, and within a few years, American Express regained its standing and its stock price recovered. The episode reinforced the value of understanding the underlying business rather than reacting to headlines. Coca-Cola entered Berkshire's portfolio in 1988. The company's global brand recognition, ubiquitous distribution network, and robust cash flows fit perfectly with Berkshire's criteria. Warren loved the product. He drank Cherry Coke daily and admired the company's ability to raise prices without losing customers. The investment became one of Berkshire's most famous holdings, and its dividends flowed steadily for decades. The story of Coca-Cola also illustrated Warren's belief that simple, understandable products could generate extraordinary returns if backed by disciplined management and strong brands. Such businesses could be held for years with little worry, allowing compounding to do its work. In the 1990s and 2000s, Berkshire expanded into railroads, utilities, and energy. The purchase of Burlington Northern Santa Fe, BNSF, in 2009 brought one of America's largest freight railroads into the fold. Railroads are capital-intensive but enjoy natural monopolies along their routes. They transport goods efficiently, are vital to the economy, and have high barriers to entry. Warren viewed BNSF as an asset that would endure for generations, providing steady returns and a hedge against inflation. Similarly, Berkshire's investments in Mid-American Energy, later renamed Berkshire Hathaway Energy, signaled his interest in infrastructure and renewable energy, including wind and solar projects. These moves showed that a long-term horizon could embrace both traditional and emerging industries. Throughout these decades, Warren remained committed to transparency. His annual letters to shareholders became required reading for investors worldwide. In clear prose, he discussed Berkshire's performance, admitted mistakes, and shared insights into business and life. He reminded readers that Berkshire's success owed much to America's economic dynamism and to the managers who ran its subsidiary companies. He often quoted Charlie, crediting him with shaping the shift from cigar butt investing to quality investing. Their partnership was marked by mutual respect and a shared delight in learning. As Berkshire's investments grew more varied, the underlying philosophy remained constant. Seek businesses with durable moats, capable managers, and fair prices, and then hold them with patience. Outside of corporate boardrooms and annual reports, Warren's daily life remained remarkably ordinary. He continued to live in the same stucco house in Omaha that he bought in 1958 for $31,500. The neighborhood was leafy and quiet, the house modest by billionaire standards. Inside, the decor was simple: comfortable chairs, family photos, and stacks of business documents. He drove himself to work each day, often stopping at a McDonald's drive-thru for breakfast. There was a familiar routine. He chose his meal based on the price of Berkshire stock that morning, a playful ritual rather than any real financial necessity. At the office, a low-rise building without signage, he read for hours, reviewing reports, letters, and newspapers. Warren's diet was famously plain. He drank several cans of Cherry Coke each day and enjoyed hamburgers, steaks, and peanut brittle. He often joked that he followed a 6-year-old's palate, choosing foods he liked as a child. His simple tastes contrasted sharply with his vast wealth, but they aligned with his philosophy of focusing on essentials and ignoring unnecessary complexity. He saw no need to impress others with expensive possessions. Instead, he invested in experiences that brought joy, such as playing bridge. He played for hours with friends, including Bill Gates, delighting in the game's mix of strategy, memory, and partnership. The cards clicking softly on the table provided a rhythm of thought that mirrored the patterns he saw in business. His love of reading remained central to his routine. Warren spent much of each day with a book or report in hand, believing that knowledge compounds like money. He often advised young people to read 500 pages a day if they wanted to get smarter. He read widely, everything from biographies and history to corporate filings and newspapers. He was curious about how things worked, how people made decisions, and how patterns repeated. This reading nourished his ability to see connections and to understand businesses deeply before investing. It also kept him grounded, reminding him of the long arc of history and the resilience of human institutions. Despite his fame, Warren cherished privacy and humility. He disliked ostentation and rarely engaged in flashy displays. He valued his relationships with longtime friends and colleagues, many of whom had no interest in his wealth. He maintained a small staff at Berkshire's headquarters, fostering a culture of trust and autonomy. He delegated authority to managers who ran their businesses independently, intervening only when necessary. This decentralization allowed Berkshire to operate efficiently despite its size. Warren would say that he did not micromanage because he chose people he trusted and then trusted them completely. In public appearances, he combined folksy humor with sharp insight. He told jokes, quoted song lyrics, and used simple analogies to explain complex ideas. He wore suits that seemed slightly out of time, spoke with a Midwestern lilt, and never forgot his roots. His humility and clarity endeared him to shareholders, who felt they could understand what he was doing with their money. Through these habits and rituals, he demonstrated that a purposeful life need not be complicated or ostentatious. The steady rhythms of reading, thinking, and living simply were as important to his success as any financial model. Underlying Warren's success were a set of principles that he shared openly. He often said, "Rule number 1, never lose money. Rule number 2, never forget. Rule number 1." This was shorthand for the importance of avoiding permanent capital losses. He emphasized that protecting downside risk was more important than chasing high returns. He advised investors to stay within their circle of competence, only buying businesses they understood. If a business was too complex or unpredictable, he simply passed on it, knowing there would always be another opportunity. He believed in patience, insisting that waiting for the right pitch was better than swinging at every ball. When markets grew euphoric, he reminded himself and others to be fearful. When fear dominated, he urged calm courage. Warren's letters often noted that the stock market was a mechanism for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. He discouraged speculation and short-term trading, explaining that trying to time markets usually hurt more than it helped. Instead, he encouraged buying slices of great businesses and holding them for years. Compounding does its best work over long periods, and frequent trading disrupts that growth. He argued that the best investments were often those that looked unexciting in the near term but had durable advantages that would become clear over decades. He cited examples like Coca-Cola and American Express to show how a good business could multiply capital without requiring constant oversight. He noted that such businesses could be held for years with minimal worry, allowing compounding to flourish. When people asked him for personal finance advice, he often suggested simple, low-cost index funds. He explained that most investors would do better by owning a broad basket of companies rather than trying to pick winners. He pointed to evidence that very few professional managers outperform the market after fees. He urged young investors to start early, stay diversified, and ignore day-to-day fluctuations. His own estate plan included instructions to invest his wife's inheritance, mostly in index funds, a testament to his faith in this approach. In doing so, he reminded listeners that even the world's best stock picker believed in the power of simple, disciplined investing for most people. Warren also talked about the importance of temperament. Intelligence and knowledge matter, he said, but the ability to control emotion is essential. Markets will always swing between optimism and pessimism. Investors who can stay rational during these swings will have an advantage. He recommended cultivating an inner scorecard, measuring success by one's own standards rather than seeking approval from others. This philosophy encouraged people to focus on what they could control: effort, curiosity, and integrity, rather than external accolades. He acknowledged that mistakes were inevitable and that admitting them openly was a sign of strength. Learning from errors and avoiding repeating them was part of the compounding process. The principles extended beyond money. Warren believed in kindness and fairness in business dealings, treating partners and employees with respect. He credited much of his success to the trust others placed in him and to the supportive community around him. He warned against envy and greed, noting that comparing oneself to others often leads to misery. He found joy in seeing ideas grow, people flourish, and communities benefit from well-allocated capital. By sharing these lessons, he hoped others would find the same peace and purpose that guided him. Warren's friendship with Bill Gates brought a new dimension to his life. They first met in 1991, when mutual friend Katharine Graham, publisher of the Washington Post, arranged a meeting at Gates's mother's house. Bill initially thought the older investor was out of touch with technology, while Warren doubted he had much in common with a young computer billionaire. Yet their conversation lasted for hours, delving into topics like business, science, and world affairs. They discovered a shared love of learning and bridge, a card game that requires strategy, communication, and patience. After that meeting, they became regular partners at the bridge table, often playing for hours and laughing over mistakes and triumphs. The friendship deepened over the years. Warren visited Microsoft's campus, where he peppered Bill with questions about software, technology trends, and the future of computing. Bill, in turn, asked about investing and business structures. Each man respected the other's expertise and humility. They traveled together, attended conferences, and even wrote joint op-eds. Their conversations were wide-ranging, reflecting their curiosity about the world. They were comfortable teasing each other in public, Bill joking about Warren's ancient flip phone and Warren quipping about Bill's taste in hamburgers. The humor and warmth of their interactions showed a genuine bond. Warren and Bill's friendship took on broader significance when they teamed up with Melinda Gates to launch the Giving Pledge in 2010. The pledge invited billionaires around the world to commit publicly to giving away the majority of their wealth to address society's greatest challenges. Warren had already pledged much of his fortune to philanthropy, but he saw the pledge as a way to encourage others to think about how wealth could serve a greater good. Bill and Melinda brought expertise from their foundation, which focused on global health and education. Together, they met with wealthy individuals, discussing how to structure gifts and measure impact. The conversations were often private, reflecting the personal nature of philanthropy, but the movement grew. Today, hundreds of signatories have promised to donate a majority of their wealth. Bridge remained a pastime that connected them. They played online when travel kept them apart, watching cards appear on screens while chatting through speakers. They competed in tournaments, sometimes with teams of friends, and celebrated each other's victories. Warren liked to joke that Bridge kept his mind sharp and his ego in check. The game's rhythms, thoughtful planning, communication, and trust, mirrored principles he valued in investing and life. Bill once said that spending time with Warren was like getting a Ph.D. in life, praising his clarity of thought and generosity of spirit. Warren, in turn, admired Bill's optimism and determination to tackle big problems. The collaboration between Warren and the Gates family extended beyond wealth. They discussed global challenges such as climate change, pandemics, and inequality. Warren often said that Bill and Melinda opened his eyes to the scale of issues outside his investment world. He trusted their judgment on philanthropy as much as he trusted his own judgment on companies. Through their friendship, both men grew. Bill learned about patience and value investing, while Warren learned about technology and the complexities of global health. Their partnership showed how curiosity and humility could bridge generational and disciplinary divides, creating a shared commitment to improve the world. Long before public promises and organized campaigns, Warren had been thinking about philanthropy. His father's example, running for Congress and standing up for civil rights, instilled in him a sense of public responsibility. Warren believed that wealth came with an obligation to give back. In 2006, He announced a plan to donate the vast majority of his fortune to a handful of foundations, including the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and his own family's foundations. He pledged to give away more than 99% of his wealth, with most of it going to causes managed by people he trusted. He structured his gifts carefully, distributing shares over time to allow compounding to continue while gradually funding charitable work. Each summer, he wrote letters explaining his donations to the recipients and to Berkshire shareholders. He emphasized that he was not trying to control how his money was used. Instead, he trusted the foundation leaders to deploy resources where they saw the greatest need. He urged them to focus on impact rather than perpetuity, to address immediate problems rather than build endowments for eternity. He called his approach philanthropy while living, noting that giving away money during his lifetime allowed him to see the results and to adjust if necessary. He also set up mechanisms to ensure that his estate would be distributed quickly after his death, preventing the accumulation of wealth that could dilute its effect. Warren's family foundations, the Susan Thompson Buffett Foundation, named after his late first wife, and the foundations run by his children Howard, Susan, and Peter, received significant shares. Each child pursued different focus areas, reflecting their own interests and values. Howard's foundation worked on agriculture and food security, Susan's on education and social justice, and Peter's on social change and the arts. Warren offered guidance but did not dictate specific grants, believing that decision-making authority should rest with those closest to the causes. He saw his role as enabling rather than directing. The largest chunk of his fortune went to the Gates Foundation. Warren admired the rigorous approach that Bill and Melinda took toward philanthropy, using data and field research to identify high-impact interventions. He trusted that their foundation would continue to address global health and education issues effectively. By giving them Berkshire stock, he allowed them to benefit from future growth while ensuring that his money would not accumulate indefinitely. He stipulated that the shares be spent within 10 years of his estate being settled, emphasizing urgency and action. He sometimes joked that if he wrote a book about inheritance, it would be a short volume entitled "Leave the Kids Enough to Do Anything, but Not Enough to Do Nothing." He wanted his children to be comfortable but motivated to build their own legacies rather than living off his. Warren spoke openly about philanthropy in interviews and lectures, explaining his choices and encouraging others to consider similar commitments. He acknowledged that his wealth gave him the luxury to give away billions without sacrificing his lifestyle. But he argued that generosity was relative. He praised people who donated smaller sums relative to their means and supported local charities. He believed that giving could bring joy and meaning, just as compounding wealth had brought independence. Through his words and actions, he reframed philanthropy as a natural extension of successful investing. Just as capital grows through disciplined patience, its impact can grow through thoughtful, timely generosity. As Warren aged, he maintained an astonishing level of engagement. Each spring, tens of thousands of shareholders flocked to Omaha for Berkshire's annual meeting, affectionately dubbed Woodstock for Capitalists. The two-day event featured hours of questions and answers, where Warren and Charlie sat on a stage, microphones in hand, and fielded inquiries on everything from macroeconomics to life advice. They answered with humor and candor, often sprinkling in stories from their youth or quoting poets and philosophers. The arena hummed with the energy of a concert, but the mood was calm and reflective. Shareholders felt as if they were listening to old friends share wisdom. Warren's annual letters grew longer and richer in insight. He discussed the performance of Berkshire's many subsidiaries, but he also devoted space to broader lessons about business, investing, and human behavior. He wrote about why Berkshire avoided acquisitions driven by fads, why the company shunned debt, and why patience paid off. He acknowledged mistakes, such as purchasing Dexter Shoe Company with Berkshire stock rather than cash, a decision he later called his worst. He praised managers like Tony Nicely at GEICO and Paul Andrews at TII, crediting them for Berkshire's success. His humility and transparency reinforced the trust shareholders placed in him. Succession planning became an increasingly common topic. Warren addressed it openly, noting that Berkshire's board had identified capable leaders who could take over when he and Charlie were gone. In 2018, he announced that Greg Abel and Ajit Jain had been promoted to vice chairman, overseeing non-insurance and insurance operations respectively. Their promotion signaled the board's confidence in them as potential successors. Warren emphasized that Berkshire's decentralized structure and strong culture would endure beyond any individual. He reminded shareholders that Berkshire had more than 60 operating companies and dozens of talented managers who ran them independently. The job of the CEO, in his view, was primarily to allocate capital wisely and maintain the company's culture. As he approached his mid-90s, Warren continued to arrive at the office early and read for hours. He traveled less but kept in touch with managers and friends by phone and email. He followed world events, read widely, and occasionally wrote op-eds. He took walks in the neighborhood with family members and attended college basketball games at Creighton University, just a few minutes from his home. He still played bridge, though his sessions sometimes moved to video calls when travel was impractical. His mind remained sharp, his jokes quick, and his curiosity intact. The rhythm of his days, the steady cadence of reading, thinking, and writing, anchored him even as the years moved on. In public remarks, Warren expressed gratitude for his good health and for the opportunities he had enjoyed. He acknowledged that luck had played a role, from being born in a stable country to having supportive parents. He urged younger generations to find mentors and friends who challenged them to grow. He continued to quote his father and Charlie, passing along lessons that had guided him. He looked ahead with optimism, noting that despite challenges, America's economic engine remained innovative and resilient. He reminded audiences that sound principles do not become obsolete. Honesty, patience, and a willingness to learn from mistakes remain the bedrock of a fulfilling life and successful enterprise. In November 2025, Warren made headlines with a heartfelt Thanksgiving message to his shareholders. At 95, he announced that he was stepping back from writing the company's annual report and from speaking at the annual meeting. "I'm going quiet," he wrote with characteristic humor, explaining that he felt it was time for fresh voices to take the stage. He reiterated that Greg Abel, who had proven himself over decades at Berkshire Hathaway Energy and in overseeing non-insurance businesses, would become the new chief executive at year's end. Warren praised Abel's energy, honesty, and judgment, urging shareholders to support him. He promised to remain available as a resource and to continue writing annual Thanksgiving letters, a tradition he cherished. The same message revealed a significant act of generosity. Warren converted 1/800 of his Berkshire A shares into 2.7 million Class B shares, which he donated to 4 family foundations. The gifts, worth more than $1.3 billion, were intended to accelerate the distribution of his fortune during his lifetime. He explained that his children, who ran these foundations, were in their 70s, and that he wanted to ensure they could direct his wealth before alternate trustees were required. He expressed gratitude for the privilege of being able to give and encouraged others to share their success with those less fortunate. In the letter, Warren reminisced about his early life, recalling stories from Omaha in the 1930s. He wrote about his doctor, Harley Hotz, who saved his life with a timely appendectomy, about his Aunt Edie, who gave him a fingerprinting set that entertained him during recovery, and about his third-grade teacher who asked his classmates to write him letters while he recuperated. He shared anecdotes about missing an early chance to meet Charlie Munger and about the community that shaped him. These personal touches highlighted the continuity between the boy who sold chewing gum and the philanthropist who was giving away billions. They also underscored his belief that luck and community play critical roles in his success. Warren's announcement of his retirement from center stage was met with both gratitude and nostalgia. Shareholders and admirers around the world reflected on decades of letters and meetings that had shaped their understanding of business and life. Many were reassured by the clarity of his succession plan and by his continued commitment to communicate through annual messages. The act of converting A shares to B shares for philanthropic purposes demonstrated once again his attention to fairness and efficiency. He had long said that at his death, his estate would be settled quickly, and his wealth distributed within a decade. By accelerating gifts while still alive, he increased the likelihood that his resources would make a meaningful impact. The 2025 letter closed on a reflective note. Warren wrote about being surprised and grateful to have lived so long. He acknowledged that his life had been full of extraordinary experiences and that he was at peace with the transition ahead. He reassured readers that Berkshire's future was bright under Greg Abel, and that his own future would be quieter, but still connected to the company he loved. He thanked shareholders for their trust and kindness over the years and hinted that his next Thanksgiving messages would focus more on philanthropy and personal reflections than on business. As always, he signed off with warmth and humility, inviting readers to share in his gratitude. Not long after Warren announced his transition, news broke of Berkshire's rare venture into big technology. Regulatory filings revealed that the conglomerate had purchased nearly 18 million shares of Alphabet, Google's parent company, worth roughly $4.9 billion. The investment surprised many who remembered Warren's long-standing reluctance to buy into tech companies he didn't fully understand. He had famously admitted that he and Charlie regretted missing Google and Amazon earlier, saying they screwed up by not recognizing their potential despite seeing their impact on Geeko's advertising bills. The new stake signaled a willingness to embrace a business model that, while rooted in advertising and data, had become integral to everyday life. Alphabet's appeal lay partly in its dominant search engine and growing cloud business, but also in its financial strength and global reach. The company generated large cash flows, carried little debt, and had a history of reinvesting in new technologies. Berkshire's investment came at a time when the market was wrestling with questions about artificial intelligence spending. Tech giants were investing billions in data centers and chips, raising concerns about whether returns would justify the outlays. Warren acknowledged that the valuation of tech companies was higher than traditional industrial firms, but believed that Alphabet's position and cash generation offered a reasonable margin of safety. He also noted that the purchase might have been initiated by one of Berkshire's portfolio managers, Todd Combs or Ted Weschler, who had gradually expanded the company's exposure to technology. The Alphabet stake coincided with Berkshire trimming its holdings in Apple and Bank of America. However, he reduced the position slightly, a move interpreted by some as portfolio maintenance rather than a change in conviction. Berkshire also continued to build its cash pile, which reached a record high of more than $308 billion in 2025. Warren often said he disliked holding cash because it earned little, but he preferred inactivity to overpaying for mediocre opportunities. The combination of new tech exposure and a growing cash reserve suggested that Berkshire was balancing caution with selective optimism. Observers debated whether the Alphabet investment signaled a permanent shift in Berkshire's strategy or a late career flourish. Warren, who was preparing to step down as CEO, emphasized that the fundamental principles remained unchanged. Understand the business, ensure it has durable advantages, and buy at a sensible price. Alphabet's dominance in search, video, and cloud computing arguably met those criteria. And while technology cycles move faster than those in consumer goods or railroads, the underlying need for information and computing power seemed unlikely to vanish. The move also reflected Warren's willingness to acknowledge past oversights and to evolve. He had long admired companies like Coca-Cola for their simplicity and stability, but he also recognized that innovation could create new moats, and that ignoring those opportunities entirely could be as risky as chasing every fad. In his annual letters, he had confessed to missing companies like Intel, Google, and Amazon, and to learning from those omissions. The alphabet stake showed that even in his mid-90s, he remained open to learning and change. It offered a final lesson that staying true to core principles does not mean refusing to adapt when the world shifts. The 2025 earnings season highlighted Berkshire's capacity for restraint. In its third quarter report, the company disclosed a cash position approaching $381 billion, the highest in its history. This mountain of liquidity raised eyebrows, especially because Berkshire did not repurchase any of its own stock during the quarter, something it had done aggressively in recent years. Warren explained that he would buy back shares only when they were trading below intrinsic value. He felt the price at that moment did not offer enough margin of safety. His decision underscored his discipline. Even with vast resources at his disposal, he would not chase investments that failed his criteria. Analysts noted that Berkshire had sold more stocks than it bought in the quarter, reflecting caution about overall market valuations. Warren had long warned investors against trying to time the market, but he also acknowledged that there were periods when high valuations limited opportunities. He compared investing to playing baseball without strikes. You could stand at the plate all day waiting for the right pitch. This analogy reminded shareholders that patience is not passivity. It is an active choice to avoid swinging at poor pitches. The cash pile, while unproductive in the short term, was a reservoir of opportunity for the future. Critics worried that holding so much cash signaled pessimism about the economy. Warren countered that he simply had not found enough attractive deals. He was willing to wait, knowing that market conditions would eventually present bargains. His past actions reinforced this view. During the financial crisis of 2008, Berkshire invested billions in companies like Goldman Sachs, General Electric, and Wrigley when panic created attractive terms. Holding cash allowed him to seize such opportunities without depending on borrowed money. He quoted his mentor Benjamin Graham's observation that investing is most intelligent when it is most businesslike. To him, that meant being willing to say no until a rational yes appeared. The record cash balance also reflected Berkshire's earnings power. The company's operating businesses, insurance, railroads, utilities, manufacturing, and retail, continued to generate substantial profits. Their reliable cash flows funded capital expenditures, dividends to Berkshire, and the accumulation of reserves. Warren reminded shareholders that these businesses were not glamorous, but steady. Insurance underwriting remained disciplined. The railroad transported goods across the country. Energy units invested in wind and solar projects, and manufacturing companies produced a vast array of products. This diversity insulated Berkshire from the ups and downs of any single industry. In communications with shareholders, Warren cautioned that high valuations and ample liquidity could tempt investors into riskier assets. He urged them not to confuse activity with productivity. He said that cash, though unattractive as a long-term investment, provided a strategic advantage. It gave Berkshire the ability to act decisively when the right opportunity rose. He acknowledged that holding cash required psychological strength because watching others make quick gains could induce envy. But he stressed that investing was not a competition with anyone but oneself. The patience he practiced with cash mirrored the patience he had learned as a child saving pennies, a constant thread through his life's work. Succession planning at Berkshire was not only about naming a replacement. It involved cultivating a culture that could endure beyond any individual. Warren often said that Berkshire was built to last for 100 years or more, and that his duty was to ensure that values and systems were in place to guide future leaders. Greg Abel, who had overseen Berkshire Hathaway Energy since 2000, was chosen to succeed Warren as chief executive. Greg was known for his tireless work ethic, straightforward communication, and ability to manage complex operations. Under his leadership, the energy unit invested heavily in wind and solar projects, expanding its renewable portfolio and demonstrating a commitment to long-term sustainability. Ajit Jain, who managed Berkshire's insurance operations, was another key figure. Born in India, Ajit joined Berkshire in 1986 after a chance meeting with Warren's former colleague, Michael Goldberg. Over the decades, Ajit proved himself a master underwriter, crafting reinsurance policies for complex risks like natural disasters and aviation. His disciplined approach and creativity generated billions in profits. Warren said on multiple occasions that if you could clone Ajit, it would be the best investment Berkshire could make. Together, Greg and Ajit provided complementary strengths in operations and insurance, two pillars of Berkshire's success. Todd Combs and Ted Weschler, portfolio managers hired in the 2010s, handled portions of Berkshire's vast investment portfolio. They had track records of thoughtful investing and managed tens of billions of dollars. Warren gave them increasing responsibility, allowing them to make independent decisions and learn from their results. Their presence ensured that Berkshire would have seasoned investors to guide capital allocation. Warren noted that they also ran operating businesses. Todd headed GEICO, while Ted served as chairman of Pilot Flying J, giving them experience beyond the stock market. Beyond individuals, Warren stressed that Berkshire's decentralized structure would remain intact. Each subsidiary operated autonomously, with its own management and culture. Headquarters had a small staff, and decisions were made without bureaucracy. This autonomy attracted entrepreneurs who wanted to sell their companies but continue leading them. Warren often said that Berkshire bought businesses with the intention of owning them forever. This promise of permanence gave managers confidence to invest for the long term without fear of being sold at the next market cycle. The trust placed in managers created loyalty and stability. As he prepared to hand over leadership, Warren wrote that he would remain available for consultation and would stay on the board as long as he felt useful. He reminded shareholders that change is inevitable and that succession is a mark of strength, not weakness. He expressed full confidence in Greg, Ajit, Todd, Ted, and the many other managers. He urged shareholders to judge them on their adherence to Berkshire's core principles rather than on attempts to mimic his personal style. In essence, he wanted the culture of integrity, patience, and rationality to endure. By building a system that rewarded those traits, he hoped Berkshire would continue to thrive long after his own quiet retirement. Charlie Munger's presence loomed large throughout Warren's career. The two men met in 1959 when a mutual friend introduced them over dinner in Omaha. Charlie, trained as a lawyer and running his own investment partnership in California, shared Warren's passion for business and humor. They quickly recognized in each other a complementary intellect. Charlie encouraged Warren to broaden his lens beyond the cigar butt approach and to consider businesses with strong economics, even if they were not statistically cheap. His sharp wit and ability to cut through complexity became a perfect counterbalance to Warren's methodical analysis. Their conversations were filled with both laughter and debate, each pushing the other to refine his thinking. For more than 60 years, they worked together, talking every day and making countless decisions. Charlie's influence can be seen in Berkshire's pivot toward quality companies like See's Candies and Coca-Cola. He coined phrases such as, "It's better to buy a wonderful company at a fair price than a fair company at a wonderful price," which Warren adopted wholeheartedly. Charlie also introduced Warren to the idea of mental models, frameworks for thinking drawn from multiple disciplines, which helped them avoid narrow perspectives. He famously said that the first rule of compounding was never to interrupt it unnecessarily, a concept that applied equally to money and to learning. In November 2023, Charlie passed away at the age of 99, leaving Warren without his closest partner for the first time in over 6 decades. Warren described Charlie as the architect of Berkshire, saying that he had done more to shape its culture and investment philosophy than anyone else. The loss was deeply felt by shareholders and admirers around the world. In his tribute, Warren wrote that Charlie had the best 30-second mind he had ever encountered, and that his ability to see the essence of a problem quickly was unmatched. He thanked Charlie for being not just a partner, but a teacher and a friend. The absence of Charlie's voice at the annual meeting in 2024 was palpable. Warren sat on the stage without the familiar banter, but he invoked Charlie's wisdom often. He reminded the audience of Charlie's quips, like the importance of avoiding envy and the value of reading widely. He shared stories of arguments they had, moments when Charlie changed his mind, and jokes that kept them laughing when decisions were hard. He admitted that Berkshire would feel different, but he pledged to carry on the principles they had forged together. He encouraged younger investors to read Charlie's writings and to study his approach to thinking. In private moments, Warren continued to hear Charlie's voice in his head. When evaluating a business, he imagined what Charlie would say about its competitive position or management's incentives. He recalled the times Charlie had stopped him from making poor decisions and the times Charlie had urged him to take bold steps. The friendship had left an imprint deeper than any one investment. Warren found solace in knowing that their ideas lived on in Berkshire's culture and in the millions of people who had read their letters and learned from their example. As he drifted toward retirement, he carried with him Charlie's counsel: to think clearly, to act rationally, and to remain humble in success. Warren's Thanksgiving letters evolved into meditative reflections on the future. He wrote about his intention to continue giving while living, noting that he had transferred billions of dollars in Berkshire stock to the Susan Thompson Buffett Foundation and to the foundations run by his children. His gifts in July 2025, worth more than $6 billion, included a large donation to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He explained that his estate plan would direct about 99.5% of his wealth to philanthropy within 10 years after his death. He wanted his children to act as trustees of his fortune, but not to bear the burden alone. He named successor trustees to step in if needed. He made clear that his will included no additional gifts to the Gates Foundation, as he had already fulfilled his pledge. In these letters, he acknowledged that his children were in their 70s and that time was of the essence. He increased the pace of his gifts to ensure they could deploy the funds while still active. He assured them they did not need to perform miracles. They simply needed to do somewhat better than government programs or average philanthropy. He emphasized that failures and disappointments were inevitable, and that he had experienced his share. He urged them to be courageous and to learn from setbacks. He believed that good intentions combined with intelligence and persistence would yield meaningful results. Warren also shared thoughts on broader societal issues. He wrote about the importance of fair taxation, arguing that wealthy individuals should pay more to support public goods. He supported policies that leveled the playing field, such as improved education and health care. He acknowledged the challenges of climate change and praised companies that were investing in renewable energy. He warned against political polarization, encouraging people to look for common ground and to respect those with different views. These reflections showed that his concern for the world extended far beyond corporate earnings. He continued to encourage others to consider philanthropy, reminding readers that giving was not the exclusive domain of billionaires. He cited stories of people who made modest donations that had a profound impact in their communities. He argued that even small acts of generosity could inspire others and create a ripple effect. He believed that the collective power of millions of thoughtful donors was as important as a few large gifts. He called on business leaders to integrate social responsibility into their operations, not as an afterthought, but as a core principle. Through these messages, Warren connected his early fascination with compounding to the idea of compounding social good. Just as money invested wisely can grow exponentially, he believed that resources devoted to education, health, and opportunity could multiply benefits across generations. He encouraged readers to imagine a world where compounding applied to kindness and knowledge as well as to dollars. As he prepared to step back from public life, he hoped that his example of patience in investing and generosity in giving would continue to inspire others to build and to share. Looking back, Warren recognized that his story had become part of America's economic narrative. He was dubbed the Oracle of Omaha, a nickname he found amusing but also humbling. He often reminded people that his success rested on the foundation of a thriving economy, a robust financial system, and the rule of law. He attributed much of his fortune to being born at the right time in the right place. He urged young entrepreneurs to appreciate the opportunities available in a market economy and to be mindful of the responsibility that came with success. He remained optimistic about America's future, despite political and economic turbulence. He pointed to the nation's capacity for innovation, from Silicon Valley startups to breakthroughs in medicine and energy. He invested in companies that reflected this optimism. Berkshire's energy businesses built wind farms across the plains and solar arrays in the desert, supplying clean power to millions. The railroad BNSF continued to transport goods efficiently, reducing carbon emissions compared to trucks. In October 2025, Berkshire announced plans to acquire OxyChem, the chemical division of Occidental Petroleum. The deal promised to expand Berkshire's industrial footprint and to provide exposure to products like PVC and chlor-alkali chemicals used in construction and manufacturing. The acquisition showed that even in his final months as CAO, Warren remained willing to make bold moves in industries he understood. Over the years, Berkshire's ownership of businesses like See's Candies, GECO, BNSF, and Mid-American Energy showed that great companies could come from any sector. Warren valued industries with strong barriers to entry and consistent demand. He avoided fads and stayed away from businesses dependent on government subsidies or unpredictable commodity prices. He favored companies with honest managers who treated shareholders like partners. These preferences created a mosaic of businesses that collectively generated reliable cash flows. The steady returns allowed Berkshire to weather recessions, pandemics, and energy crises. Warren's legacy extended beyond investing. His folksy manner and plain-spoken wisdom made him a cultural figure. People quoted his sayings at graduations and business meetings. Students read his letters to learn about patience and integrity. Journalists sought his commentary on economic events. Yet he never sought celebrity. He preferred to spend evenings with family or at the bridge table rather than attending glamorous events. His humility, and consistency made his advice more powerful. He lived the values he espoused. As he prepared to hand over the reins to Greg Abel, Warren reflected on the arc of his career. He had transformed a failing textile mill into one of the world's most valuable companies, given away tens of billions of dollars to charity, and remained devoted to the city of Omaha. He had done all of this while living in the same house, eating the same simple meals, and reading the same daily newspapers. His life stood as evidence that wealth and fame need not change a person's core. He hoped that future business leaders would see Berkshire not just as a profitable enterprise, but as a testament to the power of patience, rationality, and compassion. Tonight, as our story winds gently to a close, we think of Warren Buffett's journey from curious boy to thoughtful elder. We have wandered with him through dusty grocery aisles, early morning paper routes, quiet university libraries, bustling trading floors, and the soft hum of insurance offices. We have listened to his conversations with mentors and friends, felt the weight of decisions that shaped industries, and marveled at the discipline that allowed him to build wealth without losing himself. He showed that compounding applies not only to money, but to knowledge, kindness, and trust. By patiently stacking good habits, fair dealings, and thoughtful investments, he constructed a life that resonated far beyond balance sheets. Warren reminded us that success is not a sprint, but a slow, steady walk. He taught that mistakes are inevitable and that admitting them early prevents greater harm. He encouraged us to read widely, think independently, and measure ourselves by our own inner standards. He urged us to be generous with both resources and praise, to lift others as we climb. He cautioned against envy and short-term thinking, knowing that these emotions erode joy and clarity. He showed that a simple life can be rich in meaning, that a quiet routine can yield extraordinary results. As we lay down now, we let the lesson settle. We imagine the hum of a textile mill fading into the quiet hum of a desk lamp, the rustle of annual reports giving way to the rustle of leaves outside an Omaha window. We feel the steady beat of our own hearts and recognize that compounding applies there too. Each beat builds upon the last. Each breath sustains the next. Just as Warren's patience allowed small sums to grow into billions, our own patience can allow small acts of kindness and curiosity to grow into lives of purpose. The world around us moves quickly, filled with headlines and notifications, but Warren's story invites us to slow down. It invites us to seek clarity, to value substance over appearance, and to invest our time and attention wisely. It reminds us that we do not need to chase every opportunity. We need only choose carefully, act decisively, and allow time to work. His life assures us that generosity does not diminish wealth, it amplifies its meaning. With these thoughts, we drift into stillness. The night deepens, our minds quiet, and we carry with us the gentle wisdom of a life well lived. Good night.